Very good morning to you, Mr. Makwana. Ordinarily, we would say congratulations are in order, but in this particular situation, we literally are worried for you. What keeps you awake as you take up this position?
Thank you, Desiree. I think congratulations probably should still be not often that as South Africans we are invited and called upon to serve our country in this way that we are serving. So firstly, thank you very much for having us. We certainly have a marathon race to run as a board in terms of settling into the new responsibilities we've been assigned. And that's really the key thing right now. We are onboarding and getting grips on our responsibilities.
Yeah.
Our priorities are clear, as you've indicated, that we must keep the lights on, and that's an important priority. The second priority is to ensure that we have our fingers where they should be in terms of being on top of the game of the maintenance program at Eskom. And all these two things require another very important thing, which is to ensure that we reignite passion among the 40,000 Eskom employees to do their work with pride and re-engender some sense of love and passion for what they do.
Mr. Makwana, congratulations from myself as well, and thank you so much for giving us your time. It was just last week that the Minister of Public Enterprises announced that a new board would be constituted. I mean, how much notice were you given? And also, I think more importantly, just how much time does the board need really to familiarize itself with the utility before starting to plot a way forward to turn things around?
Well, any board worth its salt would know that you can't rush into an appointment and start fidgeting with things without at least giving yourself a week or two to onboard properly, to settle properly. And so I think that that's exactly what we're doing to ensure that we are driven by facts and data. We do fully comprehend the high irritation factor, the high annoyance that the average South African would have towards Eskom at this point due to load shedding. So we don't intend to drag our feet. So the board has been already on the ground. Soon around the announcement on Friday, we met briefly with the minister. On Monday afternoon, we had a comprehensive brief with the minister and the board in terms of the existing policy frameworks, the existing plans, the existing priorities that government has set for Eskom. We will, in the next few days, be meeting as the board to then finalize board committees and the program of the board in terms of signing off the board schedule and all that. So there's a lot of administrative onboarding that must happen. Then with that in place, we will start engaging physically with various power stations in terms of ensuring that we do site visits and all the requisite oversight that we need to start embarking upon as part of coming on board.
It must come as an advantage for you that you've previously played different roles within Eskom and therefore quite au fait with these urgent challenges at the utility. What do you hope to do differently from the outgoing board?
I think firstly we must thank the outgoing board. I wish to thank Professor Malapuru and the board of directors for the work they did. The priorities they had set themselves was to clean up the post state capture dynamics that they found as a board. And so we wish to thank them. We will take the baton where they left and proceed to do both the cleaning up and the other three priorities that I've mentioned. But the direct response to your question is that as a returning director and a returning chair, I do recall what a successful Eskom used to look like. how it used to operate. And so that becomes a key driver in having at least some institutional memory that you can work from. You may remember that in 2001, Eskom was named the global power utility in the world of the year in 2001. And so I recall when we had energy available factor of higher than 80%. But this is not something that one person or a group of 12 people alone will do. We're going to work in full alignment, in total integration with the 40,000 or so people of Eskom, because together with them, we should be able to turn the place around.
I'm keen to hear, Mr. Makwana, what the hallmarks of a successful Eskom really are. I mean, there are so many calls right now for more leadership changes beyond just the board in and of itself, calls for the removal of the CEO. What do you make of the work that has been done currently by the COO, Jan Oberholzer, as well as the CEO, Andre Doreta? And as you speak to that, maybe remind us of the hallmarks of a successful Eskom.
Thank you so much. I think we should speak to those hallmarks rather than people's individual names. So a well-performing Eskom, firstly, has high energy availability factor. Secondly, the hallmark of a successful Eskom in the nuclear space, it always used to be benchmarked among the top 3 in the world. Kuberg used to be a top-notch nuclear power station. Thirdly, the entire Eskom was ranked amongst the 10th in the world at the time by capacity. What we need to not forget as South Africans, in the beginning of the build program, the Medupi build alone was ranked amongst the 4th build in the world, which means it's one of the most complex projects anybody could embark upon. That complexity is bound to wreak havoc in any organization, given all the changes that have happened in the globe around supply chains and the like. So we need to go back to having excellence in our engineering and technical performance indicators. Most importantly, Eskom had a great balance sheet. It was celebrated as the jewel in the crown, and at some point it had higher rating than the sovereign. Whether we'll ever get to that particular hallmark, I'm not certain, given the tough economic conditions around the world that we're dealing with post-pandemic recovery. But certainly it was a high-performance, highly ethical organization which celebrated its values and constantly upheld a sense of pride in tandem with national pride about the country, South Africa. So whatever is happening today, whatever performance agreements we are going to sign with any member of ExCo, and by the way, in terms of governance, the board signs a performance agreement with the CEO. The CEO then contracts further with his ExCo. And so against that context, we have marching orders to also reflect back to when Eskom, under the leadership of many chairs before me, Ruel Khoza, Valimus, and all that, we had high standards of corporate governance. And so we need to go back to being a well-governed organization. Lastly, the hallmark of a successful Eskom is an organization that cherishes safety, that cherishes the principles of zero harm. At any given time, if you go to any basement or parking lot at Eskom, firstly, you will be greeted by cars that are all parked in reverse because of the safety protocols. Every meeting that is started would always be started with safety protocols. And so we will endeavor to go back to those best practices that we recall and see how we can fast track Eskom re-embracing them where they may have not been re-embraced anymore. But I must be quick to say that often we like the notion of coming in as leaders and sweeping clean, whereas actually the initial briefings I've been given by the executive team show that some of those practices are still there. Perhaps it's just a matter of emphasis, it's just a matter of rekindling. So we're not going to come into Eskom as a board and pretend that there's not been anything happening. There's been things happening. Perhaps certain things have fallen through the cracks that have culminated in load shedding. Lastly, there's the point of security. Security at the average power station suggests to us that if you remember that Eskom was very dear to communities, especially the host communities where it operates. And so we need to also rekindle that. The average community, whether it's a community of Malahle, Ochis, Delmas, Belfast rather, they all have to say this is precious cargo in our community, in other words, the power station, and constantly saying how do we partner as communities with Eskom to keep our power stations secure, to whittle out any bad elements that are causing these negative incidents of load shedding. With that, perhaps we can end it there, Naledi and Desiree.
Dr. Makwana, you speak of the energy availability factor, with the conversation being divided on how much energy South Africa can provide, just to take South Africans along and try to manage the expectations of South Africans with these aging power stations. What are the real possibilities just in terms of how much power Eskom can supply?
So it's early days to go into the technical details because we've not yet had a briefing, but energy availability factor simply means anywhere in the world, any power station anywhere in the world, generally, if it's doing very well, it has between 85 and 88% energy availability, because you can never have 100% energy availability for the simple reason that anywhere in the world, at any given time, you'll have one or two power stations that are offline, being either serviced or going through maintenance. And therefore, the norm is to accept that higher than 85% of available power. So whether you've got 10,000, 1,000, 50,000, 200,000 megawatts, at least 85 to 87% thereof must constantly be available. So that's what we mean when we talk about energy availability factor. South Africa has got above 40,000 megawatts. And so the challenge is to have 85 or so % of that megawattage constantly available. And so as we restore post-load shedding, as and when we get to normality, it is when we have those high levels. So the president has set a target for the country to return back to 75% at least. And that's what we will be looking as we visit the power stations to see which power station is below the threshold and needs to be bolstered up so that you come to that average 75% availability. So I do unfortunately have to rush into my next engagement at 9:30, if I may.
Dr. Makwana, I hear what you're saying, but I want to ask you this quickly. Last week, the SABC spoke to businessman Rob Herschel. He was scathing of the administration, and he says Eskom needs someone like Gayton McKenzie, who is the mayor of the Central Karoo right now, who can deal with the element of the mafia. Do you think, is this your thinking, do you think Eskom needs a person like that to deal with that particular reported aspect?
I don't know his capabilities in terms of leading power plants and power stations, so I'm in no position to comment about his capabilities. I can only comment on what I factually and practically know.
Just quickly, one last question, Mr. Makwana. I know you need to rush off, but one last question, Mr. Makwana. Essentially, we're at a point where the country is desperately looking for answers, and one wonders if the concern for you, being appointed as board chairperson, is that the work that you're going to do around governance and even the culture within Eskom is too little, too late. Let's go back to the balance sheet, the massive debt crisis that Eskom is under. Do you think we're able to turn that around anytime soon?
So that's a complicated question that can't be answered in seconds. We are optimistic that we'll turn Eskom around. We intend to do our best to do so. And so as we engage members of the media over time in various forms of updates, we will ensure that we keep you informed. I wish to take this opportunity to thank you both, my lady and Desiree, for having us. And sadly, I have to dash into another engagement. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the time. Mpho Makwana is the newly appointed chairperson of Eskom.